But think about this, Roth. How many years do you have left before these two little cuties are out of the house? And you don't have to do any of this summer stuff, and you're going to miss it so much.
Well, one's 12, one's almost 15. I don't know, maybe 25 years.
No, I mean, listen, dude, come on. They're going to be 18 and gone. Just like they're probably right now. They're probably sitting in front of a 7-Eleven like we used to do, saying, "Man, someday we're going to be in Buffalo."
Welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends take a second listen to influential bands' catalogs, track by track. I'm Ralph Bagdasarian.
And I'm Dan Fiden. We'll be taking this journey together, providing context, both personal and historical, on some legendary bands. For our first season, we've picked none other than Rush.
The office door closed early. The hidden bottle came out.
Today on Backtracking, don't touch that dial, bleacher creatures and would-be desperados. We're not in denial. We're backtracking Rush's 16th studio album, Test for Echo. If you thought the 3-year break after 1993's counterparts might result in some slow jams and yacht rock, you thought wrong. Because the band's 1996 release is hard, dirty, and dare I say, even a little proggy.
It sure is, Roth. The tour in support of Counterparts concluded in May of 1994, around the time when Geddy's daughter Kyla was born. Papa Dirk expressed to Pratt and Lurkst that he wanted to spend the full first year of her life at home, and the band went along with the extended break. Alex took the time off to record his solo album, Victor, and Neil released his Buddy Rich tribute record, Burning for Buddy. But in October of 1995, the trio reconvened at their old writing and stomping grounds, Chalet Studios in Ontario. As a result of being the decider on his solo record, it took Alex some time to reacclimate to working with Geddy. But Lurkst is a uniter, not a divider, and before you know it, the tunes were flowing. They finished up writing 3 weeks ahead of schedule, thanks in large part to inspirational quotes they put up in the studio, such as, "Individually, we are a ass. Together, we are a genius." And the boys were pleased.
And so was Peter, we've nearly had our fill, Collins, once he heard the demos. But who wasn't pleased? Well, the management of Le Studio, who got brushed off for this album. Instead, the band did something they'd never done before. They chose to record in the USA. Specifically, they selected Bearsville Studios just outside of Woodstock, New York. They also selected the legendary Andy Wallace to mix the record, and Cliff Norrell, who had finished up work on Jeff Buckley's incredible debut record, Grace. Despite having to work through 40 days of snow during the blizzard of 1996, the album was finished in April of that year.
So what else did we have to work through in 1996? The Centennial Olympic Park bombing casts a shadow over the Atlanta Summer Olympics, and Tupac Shakur is killed in a Las Vegas drive-by shooting. Blue's Clues premieres, and Gabe Newell founds the Valve Corporation. GM introduces the EV1, the first modern electric car, and Steve Jobs returns to Apple Computer. So, Roth, 1996, I remember it well.
Yeah, what were you working on? Whenever I hear "working on," you know what I think about? The song, not the, obviously it was a Chuck Berry song, but the Elvis version where it's like, "Working on a T-bone steak, a la carte, on over to the California on my mind." It's like when you're working on a steak, like it's not supposed to be work. You're supposed to savor a T-bone steak? Savor a T-bone steak, a la carte.
I don't. I mean, well, number one, I've never heard that song. Actually.
Well, you know me. I get right to the meat of what we're talking about. So I'm literally getting right to the meat.
You are getting right to the meat. So, Roth, speaking of the meat in this case is Test for Echo. We are now deep into the era of Rush that I have never experienced before. I have never listened to this album before the work that we did over the past couple of weeks, reviewing it, taking copious notes, diving deep into the lyrics, researching the history. It was totally new to me.
Yeah, and you know what? This album I probably listened to more than any of the other albums we've done so far. And one of the reasons is because it was one of the ones that I'm least familiar with. And I gotta say, I don't want to give away the money shot, but I was going to say something else. Oh God, jeez. But I gotta say, I'm very impressed. And you know what? I think that Alex doing Victor, got back to his real like Alex guitar sound, and it's like, this is really rocking. And I thought there was a lot of great moments in this album, just generally speaking. I have some criticisms, believe you me, but I was really impressed. Like I really enjoyed listening to this more than I thought I would.
I completely agree with you, Raf. I went into listening to this album really expecting the worst. I was so worried that this was going to be a complete slog. And I was actually pretty delighted by this album. Like you, I had to listen to it a bunch of times. But when that first track hits, Test for Echo hits, and I got about a minute into it, I was like, holy shit, this is actually really interesting. There's so much more proggy again. Like it's an undeniably heavy record. And again, I don't want to spoil anything, but I think it just sounds really good. I think it's a great sounding record. So why don't we dig into some of the meat, some of the production stuff? But before we do that, Raf, here are the basics. I know you want to know the basics. Here they are. Yeah, this album, it is 53 minutes and 32 seconds long. It was released September 10th, 1996. Raf, where were you on September 10th, 1996?
That was my senior year of college. And what I would have been doing, I would have been bullshitting my way through film school. I didn't attend many classes that year. Instead, I spent most of my time working with friends downstate, either in the city or like SUNY Purchase, working on movies. So I think that might have been when like Hale Bop was in town, or when we could see Hale Bop. Because I remember shooting something with the Purchase guys at some wooded like motel, like in the Catskills. And I remember at nighttime, you just look up and the Hale Bop comet was there. And we all put sneakers on and we were going to inject ourselves with cyanide. Which
is, of course, obviously, we're not going to do
that's what you do.
We're not going to do Backtracking Hanson yet. We're probably going to do that season 2 or season 3. But that's, of course, the inspiration to their huge hit song, Hale Bop, if you remember. Hale Bop, 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 boo, bop. All right, so
it was. So by the way, Hale Bop was visible to the naked eye from May 96 to December 97. So it would have been like right there. And so this is like Hale Bop era Rush. This is pretty special.
Hale Bop era Rush. That is undeniably the most interesting era of their career.
But I do want to say something though. When I was talking to my brother Ara, who some of you may know from previous episodes, he was the one mumbling his way through some thoughts.
Yes.
So he was telling me that I forgot if it was Worth or Jeff. I think it was Worth. Worth Hawes, like the keyboardist or bass player of his band, the Frayed Knots, out of Leesburg, Virginia. Really fun act. You should go see them in Leesburg. And he was saying that that's like, this is the era, like it was Counterparts and Test for Echoes that made him a Rush fan in the first place. Like,
he must be younger.
No, he's older. He's a little older. He's probably a few years older than us, but he just started to get into Rush right around the time of those albums. And you know what? It kind of makes sense because I think he's from deeper in the country, like Virginia. We grew up in Buffalo. That's like Rush's American hometown next to Cleveland, but it's as close to, hometown Toronto as it gets. I mean, we share the same media demographics, the TV, radio, everything. And so maybe it was the success of 1993's Roll the Bones, which we discussed being a very popular, one of the most popular best-selling albums, that could have gotten him into Rush. That's maybe when they got into the interior a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. That is, I don't know anybody who got into Rush post Presto, but you claim this person exists, and I believe it. So anyway, Roth, it released September 10th, 1996. It went gold October 23rd, 1996. When did it go platinum?
2005.
Never. It never went platinum, Roth. It has never been certified platinum by the RIAA. Not surprising to me because you really don't hear all that much, even within Rush circles, about these last few albums.
Now, how many albums does it need to sell to go platinum? Because if I win the lottery, I'll buy that many albums just so it goes platinum. And I'm saying it here. So if I win more than, I don't know, like $600 million in the lottery, I promise everyone listening, I will buy enough albums to make this go platinum.
I think that would be a tremendously foolish waste of money, Rafi. I don't advise that at all. I am not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice, but please don't do that.
Well, knowing my luck, I'll probably win the lottery and I'll have to make good on it because I just made that promise. And then it's going to cost like $599 million. And in taxes taken out of the 600, I'll be like probably 200 million in debt because of what I just said.
Horrible move.
Anyways,
horrible move,
right.
Raf. Real dumb.
Too late.
Okay.
It's too late to renege on it. So let's keep going.
So, Raf, cover art. You want to talk about the cover art of this album a little bit?
Yeah, let's talk about it. It's got a unique and striking design, designed by. Can you guess?
I can guess, but I'll let you spoil it for the fans.
Was it Andy Warhol?
No, it was not.
Was it Basquiat?
No.
You tell me. I have no idea.
Hugh Syme, my friend. It was
Hugh Syme, of course.
Hugh Syme time. So the cover of this album, it is kind of a realistic looking photo of an unrealistically proportioned Inuksuk, or a cairn, which are these balanced rock sculptures that you'll sometimes see marking trails and parks. And the Inuit people, apparently, I didn't know this until I did my research, but the Inuit people would build human-shaped cairns or balanced rock sculptures, and they'd call them Inuksuks. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. So to our Inuit fans out there, I apologize. And they would use those as frequently as like a memorial. So someone died here, marking kind of more, I guess, spiritually important things. So anyway, you see that, and then you see three small people. I assume they're intended to be human-sized people, and the Inuksuk is intended to be gargantuan, but you see three people climbing it. And then there's kind of a snowy expanse behind him.
I'd never noticed that before. My mind is blown. Like I'm learning in real time here.
You never noticed the people?
I never noticed that.
Oh my God. The people are really the only thing that kind of, I think makes it like interesting, to be honest with you. So I think this one is, it is an inoffensive cover. It is visually okay. It's not displeasing to me. But I guess what I really struggled with, and one of the things I really like about many of Hugh Syme's covers, is they tend to have some kind of meaning, some kind of reference to one of the album, either the title of the album or one of the songs on the album. And I couldn't quite figure out what that reference might be. Cairns are used to, as I said, mark trails, mark graves, things like that. Maybe this is some kind of a symbol. It is in reality, these things are kind of a symbol of human presence in a place where human presence isn't common. Is that somehow related to the name? Test for echo, trying to test to see if there's something there.
That's what I've always felt when I've seen the album cover, because it's this very cavernous kind of landscape, right? It actually isn't cavernous. It's just a snowy landscape, but the rocks make it feel cavernous, right? So It's almost like these rocks are sort of like precariously positioned, in that if there's any kind of sonic disturbance, it could all come crashing to the ground. That's kind of the way I've always sort of imagined the link between the music. But we should keep that in mind as we go through the tracks. Maybe we'll discover it as we talk and get in deeper with each of the songs on the album.
I doubt it, but we can certainly try that, Raf. There is a song on the album called Totem. I kind of thought maybe this is a kind of totem, and Inuksuk is kind of a totem, I guess. But I don't know. Overall, this is definitely not one of my favorite Hugh Syme album covers. It is, it's not bad. It's not offensive. I don't dislike it actively.
You might hang it in the mud room, right? You wouldn't relegate it to a shitter in the basement, but you might put it in the mud room.
Yeah, I would say that I like this album cover a little bit better than, for example, Grace Under Pressure's cover, but I like it a little bit better than a Show of Hands cover, but I don't like it anywhere near as much as some of my absolute favorite covers, which, Rafi, top of the list is...
Moving Pictures.
No, signals. God damn it.
Singles.
Just aren't even fucking listening. All right. So do you want to get into, the only other thing I wanted to say about the album art, if you look at the interior album art and go through that, you can find it on the really great Cygnus X1 message board kind of Rush fan site. They have all of the interior album art for, I think, pretty much all the albums. Nothing of note in there, with the exception of some very adorable old photos of Neil, Geddy, and Alex as kids with their instruments. So they almost look like kind of the first or one of the first photographs that any of them had of them. So there's like a probably 12-year-old Neil sitting behind a drum set. There's a very young Alex with a guitar, and there's a very young Geddy with a guitar sitting in a chair kind of outside. I thought those were quite cute, but the rest of it was just kind of meh for me. So, Ross, production and arrangements. Peter Collins is back. He is back for his final Rush album. Yeah. But a big change for the guys. Totally new studio. They abandoned the studio in favor of Bearsville.
Good decision. I think it was a good decision as well.
Well, I think it's, apparently they made the decision because they wanted a larger room for Neil's drums. They wanted a big room sound for the drums, and I guess the studio didn't really accommodate that, and Bearsville did. They also went with kind of Andy Wallace and Andy Wallace's crew doing mixing and engineering, which I do think made a big difference as well.
Yeah, and so people who don't know, he worked with bands like Nirvana, Slayer, so a rock producer, right, or a rock mixer. So another thing that might have contributed to why they changed the room is that there was a period of time where Neil started studying jazz drumming with Freddie Gruber, right? And this was like the first. So this was one of the first albums that, if not the first album that they recorded, where he was incorporating some new techniques, new jazz techniques. And you can find online some interviews with Neil Peart talking about how that influenced his playing style. And there are songs like "Driven" is a good example. I mean, I don't want to put the cart ahead of the horse or the horse ahead of the cart, which comes first. I don't know, but there are some songs like "Driven" where you can hear, Neil playing around with new rhythms and new sounds. And I think it really contributed to a looser feel. And that allowed room and space for Alex to really rock out. Because you remember we're talking about it on Presto, and even Roll the Bones, how even though there weren't many keyboards in it, it still sounded like synth era Rush. Yeah. This doesn't sound like synth era Rush. This sounds like later rock and Rush. So it's a very different Rush.
I completely agree with you, Rafi. I had heard about the time when Neil started to study with Freddie Gruber and how, following that period of time, he primarily used traditional grip as opposed to matched grip, holding his sticks. But I have to be honest, I never really thought in later videos I saw of Neil playing live, it never really struck me that his playing sounded that much different than the earlier playing. But I have to say, listening to this album, I think you're completely right. This is my favorite. I may be shocking you here. After listening to this album, I think this is my favorite Neil Peart drumming of the entire career of Rush. And that completely shocked me, but it really is noticeably different. Not only are the kinds of beats that he plays different on this album, not kind of across the board different, but there's just a very different feel to his playing in here. It is noticeably looser. And I love it. Actually, I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah, and you know what? We discussed this in previous episodes, but after this album, tragedy befell Neil Peart, and in the process, the band essentially disbanded indefinitely. They didn't know if they were going to get back together again, if they were going to stay broken up, and they got back together again. And it really is interesting because had that not happened, I'd be very interested to see what direction the band would have taken, because I think it would have been vastly different. Not better or worse, I can't say that, but it would have been vastly different than the band that got back together in 2000, I think it was, when they came out with 2001 Vapor Trails. Yeah. So
Ralph, sorry, go ahead.
Because I was going to say, I think we said this about counterparts that it was a prototypical album in many ways. And I think we
Yeah.
see it more coming to fruition in this album. So I think the next one, had they kept that momentum, would
Yeah.
have been, gone in that trajectory, and we would have gotten another like 3 or 4 new era Rush albums. And we are entering a new era, but it vastly changed with that tragedy and with Vapor Trails, which I thought was a gigantic misstep in many respects, that they ameliorated later. But just food for thought.
Yeah. So on that topic, so overall, I mean, listen, we've talked about the production here. I absolutely love the production. I love Alex's guitar sound. It is heavy, but it is not like weirdly non-Rush like, which is the way I kind of felt like with Counterparts.
Yeah.
Geddy's playing, I think, is just unbelievable. And again, there is like a certain looseness to Geddy's playing that I found really interesting. But more than anything, I love Neil's drumming on this album. But Raf, it is so noticeably so much more proggy than anything they've really done since, I'm going to say, Moving Pictures, right? And I got to thinking, I'm going to make that assertion. I'm going to say to you, Raf, my assertion, and you can reject it if you don't like it, is this is a real return to a prog band. It isn't as though it is a tremendously complex, very proggy album, but this is the first time that I feel like it is predominantly proggy. And I, as I was thinking about that, I was like, gosh, this album in a weird way feels to me like if they had their career up through hemispheres and then just took like 20 years off and this was the next album after Hemispheres, it would make so much more sense in some ways. Their career would seem like much more of a consistent progression, because I think the style of playing, especially Alex's playing, feels like there's more continuity with that pretty early era of Rush than really what we've seen in the past, 15 years of albums. What do you think about that?
I don't disagree with that, and I'd want to sit on the toilet for a bit on that. But the that means think on it. I could have just said think on it. But this was a time, I remember like the late 90s. It was a time when a lot of bands, like I remember I saw Iron Maiden in Rochester. I don't know if you were at that show, but we saw Iron Maiden. I was excited to see Iron Maiden with their whole show with Eddie.
Wait, we saw Iron Maiden in Rochester, but it must have been like, dude, that was like 90. That was like 1990 or 1991 or something.
Yeah, I think you're right. But there was this period where, because of grunge, a lot of artists were like, we're just going to get back to the basics, right? We're getting back to our roots. And I think that's what Rush was intending with Counterparts to some degree. I agree. Trying to find relevancy in a ridiculously changing musical landscape. I mean, we forget how radically it was like the Beatles invasion Nirvana, right? And I think with this, they sort of like the dust settled and they're just like, no, we're just going to be ourselves, right? We're going to be ourselves. And, we do want to get more to like guitar driven rock, and that had nothing to do with grunge. That had to do with the whole synth era, and I think Alex really cleansed his palette and found himself again. And I think that really is the story. I mean, but not just Alex, but also Neil, right, with his new drumming style. And I think that they're so fresh in this album, and I'm really sort of sad that I missed it when it came out, right? Because I mean, I knew it came out and I heard little bits, but I didn't really go deep with it like I did now. So I think we said everything there was to say about this album, so that was a good episode.
I think, listen, Raf, I think I agree with everything that you've said there. I just want to leave, in our kind of summary conversation. After I listened to this album, and I listened to it quite a few times, this is not an album that is well loved by critics, and it does not seem to be well loved by Rush fans either. It is not an album that a lot of people talk about. But after a few listens to this album, I have issues with it for sure, and we'll talk about those. But is this actually a great album? I mean, I kind of came away from this album like, fuck, this is so much better than I expected. It isn't my favorite Rush album by any stretch, but like, this is a pretty good album. I mean, I was like really, really surprised and delighted.
Well, I think on that note, we should get into the tracks.
Let's do it. Now, Raf, one other issue though, before we get into it, there are, once again, I looked on Discogs, there are 3 sides to this vinyl. So we may have to cut this into 3 albums or 3 episodes again. We'll make that decision, but I think we should kind of deal with it as though we're going to do three episodes. Hopefully maybe short episodes, but that's just a process point. So Roth, side A, the first song, the eponymous Test for Echo, 5 minutes, 53 seconds, music by Leon Lifeson, of course, lyrics by Peart and Pi Dubois. Pi Dubois makes another appearance on this album, on this song. So why don't we give it a goddamn listen?
What a show, vertigo, video vertigo, test for echo, touch and go in slow-mo, video vertigo, test for echo, test for echo.
So when I listened to this song, so one of the first things I did was I tried finding if is like a test for echo, like a technical thing like that, surveyors do, or is it? And it isn't. It's like they came up with it, right? So it's clearly in keeping with some of the previous themes and previous albums of this era, has a lot to do with, themes of communication, perception, a search for truth in a world full of noise, right? That's the type of song it is, lyrically speaking. Dan, what did you take away from this song?
Well, listen, lyrically, I think this is an interesting one, right? This did not come across to me as a classic Pi Dubois lyric contribution. I don't think they tend to be as on the nose as this. And so much about current events, but this is very much a statement about, the current events, the culture of the day. So specifically, I feel as though this is a new topic for Neil. It's about the fetishization of televised crime and trials. So I'm guessing we're talking about the era of the TV show Cops, if you remember that.
The OJ trial was 95, like a year before this, right?
Yeah, court TV is becoming a thing, right? And so there's a lot more of this kind of like true life reality TV shows, which of course, Rafi, if I'm not mistaken, you worked on one of these true life. What was it? America's Wildest TV or car chases?
Which was America's Wildest TV? No, it was a show it was on Fox Primetime, 8:00 on Fridays. It was we called it Police Videos, but it started off as World's Wildest Police Videos.
Yeah.
And then they just shortened it to Police Videos, and then just PV, and then just
Yeah. But so I do feel like they're probably talking a little bit about that. Now, difficult to kind of disagree with, I think, the sentiment here, that fetishizing crime and fetishizing kind of criminal justice is probably not a great thing. But I will say that some of the lines in here haven't aged particularly well, 20 years on or so, whatever we are, like, he's talking about tough talking hood boys and stuff like that. I think that stuff probably wouldn't fly quite as well today. But overall, I think it's an okay set of lyrics. The video vertigo piece, I think, within the context of the actual vocal line, is really nice and really memorable. It sounds really good in there. My biggest issue with these lyrics, though, Raf, is the last stanza. They actually sing the lines, can't do the time, don't do the crime, which I believe is like a phrase that was uttered.
Time and it's 18 and okay, sorry.
I mean, that I feel like that line has probably been uttered many times in World's Wildest Police Chases and Cops and America's Most Wanted. Pretty trite, pretty cliche. So I don't love these lyrics, but I don't think they're horrible.
Yeah, and I mean, there was a lot of this going on at the time where there were like celebrity attorneys, and
yes,
I don't know if maybe they were inspired. Judge Wapner, who did the People's Court, he's got his own root beer, by the way, and on the root beer
you've actually mentioned that on another episode.
I know, because it gives you an idea of how much it made an impression on me. It says, "I sentence you to drink my root beer."
Well, listen, I would say I sentence you to deliciousness. I sentence you to the root beer deliciousness. Okay, so yeah, it is a strange time, and obviously, probably one of the most notable and indirectly culturally consequential famous lawyers of that era was, of course, Robert Kardashian, who unfortunately indirectly spawned what has become a very strange world of kind of just people that
half-breed armos.
All right. So anyway, Raf, why don't we move on to the music? Okay. I'm just going to say my first note on the music to the song, not super articulate, but I think pretty clear. Just great. I fucking love this music. I think it's just great. I just love this music.
Yeah, I do too. It has a very flowing, sort of ominous kind of feel to it. It suits the lyrics remarkably well. That's the first thing, and I think that's really important for music to do, for them to fit together to tell a story. And I think they really do that really well. And there are some really cool, like, driving riffs here with like really complex, not melodies, but rhythms.
Yes.
Right?
So like that breakdown just prior to the chorus, or maybe kind of the first part of the chorus, but it's right there. It's just so heavy and interesting.
Yeah.
It's really, really great. And I think this song really announces what is an amazing drumming album. It is just awesome drumming. On this part. I'm going to bring this up again in a moment, but I would say that if you listen to certain songs on this album, this one and Driven in particular, I feel I'm not certain, probably will never know, but I feel as though there is a very discernible Matt Cameron influence on Neil Peart's drumming on this album. Matt Cameron, of course, one of my favorite drummers, perhaps my favorite drummer, maybe not my favorite drummer, but one of my favorite drummers, certainly, drummer for Soundgarden. Now he's the drummer for Pearl Jam, but of course, kind of became notable as the drummer for Soundgarden. He has a very, very interesting, unusual, in my opinion, kind of unusual, very heavy, but kind of off-kilter playing style. And he does a lot of polyrhythmic stuff where he'll do kind of 3/4 and stuff like that. And there's a bit of that on here, a little bit more space in Neil's playing.
Do you think he inspired this playing? He would have had time. Yeah.
I do. No, I actually do. I think there's a little bit of a Matt Cameron influence on Peart in here, although they are very different types of players, right? But I do think that there's a bit of influence.
Well, it sounds like Neil Peart was open to bringing in new inspirations and I mean that's the thing that Rush has always done, right? They've always sort of been a sponge for what's been out there, and they've always reflected it in their art.
Yeah.
Did you get that one?
I did. Yeah. Yes.
In their art. Okay.
Yep. All right.
You guys listening? You get that one?
Anything else you want to say about Test for Echo before we move on to the next song?
No. I mean, I would say, yeah, listen to it.
Yeah, no, great song. All right, so second track on side A, Driven, 4 minutes and 47 seconds. Music, Leon Lifeson, lyrics, just Peart this time. This was the single off of the album, by the way. So we should really give it a nice, close listen.
Let's do that. Driven by Rush.
It's my turn to drive, but it's my turn to drive. Driven to the margin of error. Driven to the edge of control, driven to the margin of terror, driven to the edge of a deep dark hole.
All right, Raf, what do you think about the lyrics to this song?
They're repetitive. That's my biggest criticism of the song, and that's both lyrically and musically. It's repetitive, and you can tell that is the intention of the song, though. Like, I don't think that was a mistake, because with each version of It's My Turn to Drive, which is the chorus essentially, it gets a little bit more intense, and especially rhythmically, less with the guitar and the bass and the vocals, but rhythmically especially, it he's exploring new rhythms with like every time he does it, but it does get a little repetitive. I found myself listening to it and I'm like, this is awesome. And like, I can't wait to see where it goes. And it was just like sort of like a loop that kept going. And I would just get a little agitated, quite honestly, when I'd hear it's my turn to drive. And I'm like, why? I know. Right. So that was the thing that really struck me the most with this song. It does have a lot of really great polyrhythms in it, as you were saying.
Yes.
And I think from a rhythmic standpoint, it's a fantastic song. Melodically, structurally, it takes some energy to listen to.
Yeah, so on the lyrical front, I will say that I maybe disagree a little bit with you. There is nothing about these lyrics that really delights me, but I think the "It's my turn to drive" line is very evocative. It's a very memorable line, and the fact that they use it in the chorus with such repetition, I actually think is one of the most memorable things about this song. I love how they go from like these very heavy verses into like what is a more jangly kind of, I don't know if that's an acoustic that Alex is playing in the chorus, but it sounds acoustic-y. It has that jangly kind of acoustic sound. Well,
and one of the things that I'm sort of, it's dawning on me now, and it's funny that having the conversation does sort of, it's sort of like a, when you listen to it on your own, it's like pouring the cask strength bourbon, and like having the conversation is like adding a little bit of water for it to open up a little bit. That's my best analogy. And with that little bit of water added, I am sort of realizing that, when the lyrics are saying driven to the margin of error, driven, usually when Rush is talking about pushing the boundaries, it's them pushing the boundaries on themselves, right? Or Neil, it's usually a self-inflicted sort of drive. This though, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a passive push, right? It's like I'm being pushed in all these directions, driven to the margin of error, but fuck you, it's my turn now. It's my turn to actually drive. So it feels that it's like a passive experience, and this is about wresting control from the forces that are beyond our control.
Yeah, I have to say, I spent quite a bit of time reading these lyrics, trying to figure out what this song is really about, and I can't quite figure it out. It was unclear to me whether Neil in this is literally talking about his desire to go out and drive his motorcycle long distances, or drive his sports cars long distances, go out for these long drives, or whether it is more of like, a personal drive, kind of a spiritual drive, something like that, or whether
he's taking the Charger in the garage out for a spin.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't. But I couldn't both of those things seem like obvious conclusions or obvious meanings for this song, given the lyrics. But I didn't really ever feel like there was one lyric or one stanza in here that I could kind of dig into and say, that's what Neil's usually getting about.
But
now,
I do get the sense of frustration though with this song.
Yeah.
And maybe that's reflected in the repetition. But I do get the sense of frustration, especially with the it's my turn to drive. Like, okay, it's I'm going to be in control now. It feels like, and there's there's literally talk about sliding and slipping right on the black ice. So it's almost as if, I'm being pushed around against my will, and I'm at that breaking point where I need to take control. And it's grappling with having to let yourself go enough to be, fluid with all the other relationships and all the extraneous sort of forces in one's life. But there are times where you just need to take control. And that's what this song to me is saying, is the determination and the resolve to just take control. Not to do anything in particular, but just to okay, I need to slow down. It's my turn to drive. I need to know where I'm going. I can't let others choose that path for me.
Yeah, I mean, could be. I just normally, I think when pure lyrics are unclear, you can usually kind of get the nugget, get kind of the crux of what he's going for in that last stanza. He likes to, as we've said many times, kind of turn the knife on the lyric in that last stanza. But I didn't really get too much out of it here. So I would say that these lyrics are functional. They're okay. But not, for me, not particularly evocative or memorable in terms of the content of what he's saying. But the music, Raf, can we just talk about the opening riff? because I fucking love the opening riff. It's just Gad and Alex playing this like really primarily rhythmic figure a few times, and then they kind of kick into the verses. But I really love that start. And again, it's stuff like that that makes me feel like this is a much more proggy album. That is not like tremendously complicated or anything what they're doing, but it is kind of a more
But that opening riff, though, if it was a Maiden riff from like 1977, you'd be like, yeah, it's an awesome Maiden tune.
Yeah.
There'd be harmonizing guitars, of course, but it would, maybe a little more tapping, but.
And then you mentioned it, Raf, but really this song is the song where I kind of the lights went off and I was like, Jesus, he's really been influenced by Matt Cameron here. If you listen to, I think it's about 2 minutes, around minute 2 of the song, there is a groove that's a really cool groove, and Neil plays this polyrhythmic kind of figure over it where he's playing 3/4. So he's playing like 3 on the ride cymbal and 4 on kind of the bass drum and the snare drum, basically. And there's probably more stuff going on than that, but more or less that's what's happening. And it is incredibly evocative, in my opinion, of one of my favorite Soundgarden songs, and a song that like I spent lots of time trying to learn how to play, and then I proceeded to kind of do the same shit in a lot of when I would play drums a lot. But it's a song "Mind Riot" by Soundgarden off Bad Motorfinger. So if you have the opportunity, listen to this song and then go listen to Mind Riot. They don't sound the same at all, but the drumming, I think, is kind of, one is evocative of the other.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of what you just said times like 3 or 4. Obviously he does different sort of rhythms in different parts of the song. That's what the song is to me musically. And there is that really cool riff, which it's a cool riff, but I think they overuse it. It gets too much. And then it opens up with the chorus, right? And it's my turn to drive. And it's honestly, if you're going to take the music and sort of, and translate that to what is the emotion that it's evoking, it's like, I'm taking a breath. Like, okay, I need to stop and take a breath, and then they rock. So it's almost like you're being thrown around in the ocean, forces against your will, and then you take control. And once you have control, you just go balls to the wall. That's what this song is over and over again.
Balls to the wall, Ralph. Well,
I'm to the wall.
I'm in agreement with that. I will say that this song is just so heavy, but it's so different than the kind of heavy that they did on Counterparts. This is a heavy song that really feels to me like a logical outgrowth of, again, the Rush that we hear on like Hemispheres. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This feels like Rush to me, even though it is a heavy Rush. And Counterparts, I liked what they did on that album. It is an interesting album. I like the kind of rawness and heaviness of it as like an experiment, but it does, to your point, feel like Rush is kind of putting on somebody else's shoes and they don't quite fit.
Yeah.
The shoes fit quite a bit.
And you know what? This is something that I could have said just at the general comments about this album, but when we did Counterparts, remember I said that this and Test for Echo, they're kind of like bleed into the same album for me. They're definitely distinct albums. And that's something
Test for Echo and Vapor Trails?
No, Test for Echo is in Counterparts. I said that about Counterparts. Yeah. I said that in side A of Counterparts. I said that, Counterparts and Test for Echo, I sort of like Rush kind of lost me and I didn't really. Surprisingly though, like I did get back into them when I got back, when they did Test for Echo. Or no, oh, Jesus Christ. Vapor Trails.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, Raf, why don't we move on? Are you ready to move on?
Dan? Yes. I think it's time.
Okay. So track 3 on side A, Rafi, is called Half the World. It is 3 minutes and 43 seconds. Lyrics and music by the same old fucking people that we're always getting the same lyrics and shit from. Do you want to just give it a quick listen?
Let's do it. Half the World by Rush off of Test for Echo.
Half the world lives, half the world makes, half the world gives, while the other half takes. Half the world is, half the world was, half the world thinks, while the other half does. Half the world talks.
So, Rafi,
Half the World.
it's the world. Why don't we start with the lyrics?
Yeah. Very deep. It's making a singular point, right?
Yeah.
And that's reflected in the end of the chorus. Half the world tries to be the other half.
Yep.
A sort of grass is greener.
That is the classic Peart knife turn at the end. He really delivers kind of the punchline at the very end, and I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I think it's very poignant, especially like the opening lyric. Half the world hates what the half the world does every day, right?
Yeah.
Half the world waits while half gets on with it, and it's only it almost has this sort of anagram for Mungo kind of vibe to it, where he's taking the same kind of theme and he's just playing on words. Not
Yeah, no, I actually think that is not something that I thought about, but I think that's a really good connection to draw. He definitely kind of sticks with this half the world thing throughout. I think the negative side of that is it becomes very repetitive. So if you felt like Driven has a repetitive lyric, you are not going to love the amount of repetition in this one. I think from a message perspective, this felt very second nature to me, right? It's a very plaintive kind of on the nose. Who can object to this view of, what the world should be? It's just kind of like give peace a chance. You know what I mean?
But what I like about the lyrics, and this is what I like about Neil Peart's lyrics in general, is that he's doing it in a non-judgmental way, right? He's sort of just observing and marking those observations in the lyrics, right?
Yes.
It's not like when he says like half the world is, half the world was, half the world thinks while the other half does. He's not like saying one's better than the other necessarily. He's just pointing out that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, listen, I don't want to pick a big fight with you here. I would say that Peart is sometimes very non-judgmental, but at other times he's pretty fucking judgmental, right?
Well, half the world talks with half a mind on what they say. I mean, that's
I think
true.
Like this, lyrics like Free Will do not really, give much space for religiosity. He clearly is like, I will choose the path that's clear. You'll be a fucking dipshit and I'll go the right.
He's not even saying that. He's like, you can choose a ready guide in some celestial voice if you choose not to. He's just saying, right? I think even when he's being judgy, he's not. Right?
He's big judgy. That son of a bitch, that judgy son of a bitch. Listen, I don't know. I think overall these lyrics work about as well as any of the lyrics on this album. I'm going to kind of throw in a generalized comment here. I don't think that I think the lyrics on this album overall are really the weak point. I feel like the lyrics are just not as good as, kind of really.
Yeah, there's not much to think about it. When you listen to this, you just sort of, it's like, if someone tells you something and you're just like, you look at them and you're like, cool. And that's really all you think about it. That's kind of like the lyrics.
They're inoffensive. I think he treads the same ground, which obviously you're going to do after as many albums as they have, right? When you get to album 16, you're probably going to retread some of the same ground.
Yeah.
I don't think they're problematic, but I do feel like they're much less inspired than really kind of the lyrics across all of the albums up through, I'm going to say, Presto. World of Albums even has some high points in it, but I do feel like there's been a fall off on the lyrics in Counterparts and then on this one.
Now, can we talk about the music though? Because I have more to say about the music.
Please. I have substantive. I have nothing to say about the music, Ralph, so I want to hear what you have to say about it.
Okay, and it's not a lot. I mean, it's not too deep. But first of all, I love the riff, like the main riff. Dun, 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 dun. It's just a very ambling kind of rock riff, right?
Yeah.
It's not super hard, not super soft, but it just is like, it's,
straight ahead.
I probably like because I listened to this album twice when I was hiking in Lake Arrowhead, right? I was going up a steep hill and it helped me keep a pace when I was going up the hill. So maybe that's why I like it, but it has this really cool, loose, open, but still kind of tight groove, which I really like. But it kind of, go ahead.
It's jangly. I mean, it's pretty straight ahead jangly rock, right?
Yeah.
I got it.
So there is a weird part towards the end where it's like, I think it's where he starts half of us divided, like a torn up photograph, where they get into this weird sort of ascending guitar part with like I don't know what kind of chords they are. not seventh, maybe sixth chords, but he does this weird sort of ascending guitar part, and then and it just sort of goes nowhere. It's sort of like we're walking to the edge of a cliff, looking at it and saying, okay, let's go back. Right. So it's an interesting song. It's a good driving song. I think you said it. I should have just said it. It's inoffensive.
It is inoffensive. This is kind of one of the more mass songs. I don't dislike this song at all, but it's a pretty forgettable tune. It's kind of straight ahead, jangly rock. Nothing wrong with it, but it's not going to go down in anyone's kind of top 10 of Rush ever, in my opinion.
Yeah, so, and it's not as poppy as the next song. Oh God, Rafi.
What a transition! I mean, did you plan that one?
Dude, I was fucking waiting for like weeks to do that. Wasn't it awesome?
Wow, that was great. That's the kind of transition writing and segue writing that they require at the world's wildest police chases.
They do. I mean, I did one that I already recited it once. A drugged up bandit tears up Tinseltown. It's lights, cameras, and plenty of action. Coming up next, The Color of Right by Rush. Let's give it a listen.
Equality of justice, equality of light, a particle of mercy makes the color right. Gravity and distance change the passage of light. Gravity and distance change the color.
The Color of Right. I'm going to say that I think that this is probably, these may not be the best lyrics on the album in my opinion, but they are definitely within the top 2 or 3 songs. I think this is the most personal song. I think this song probably from a lyrics perspective works the best. It really felt to me, and I've made this assertion, I may be reading too much into it, but it really felt to me as though this is a song that Neil wrote directly to his wife about issues they were having while he was on the road.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
And to be honest with you, that level of kind of like confessional lyric writing is something that I really like, and Peart does not do very often. But I think especially in these later albums, it tends to be what works best for him. You know, I just think it just comes across as the most personal, the most emotionally honest. It isn't kind of him giving, making kind of morality plays or anything like that. It's a pretty straightforward kind of a relationship song. And I think it connects with, it's something that, anybody who's in a relationship and has gone through, struggles around separation and how difficult it can be to kind of maintain that emotional connection and trust and all that stuff. I think it hits on that stuff very well. So
yeah, and I think the one lyric in particular just hits the nail on the head. He says, "I'm so full of what is right, I can't see what is good." Yeah,
right. I mean, there are really some great Peartian turns of phrase in here, and then in the next stanza, he flips that around. You know what I mean? Where is it? I'm so full of. You're so full of right, you can't see what's true. You know what I mean?
And what's interesting about those lyrics is that they're both virtues, right? And it's like, it's, how we talk the lesser of two evils. Well, what about the greater of two goods? And that's kind of what he's contemplating here. Is like, if he is talking about being on the road and neglecting, right, his family or whatever it may be, or a relationship, he's like, well, it's right that I'm providing. It's right that I'm doing right by my bandmates and our fans and everything like that. But I can't see what's good. Yeah. Right? I mean, it really is. It's got to be emotionally jarring to have to come to that realization.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it kind of goes to the complexity of balancing relationships as you kind of get older and your life gets more complicated. And sometimes you can't just have this perfect clarity of like, this is what's right. You kind of need to, you can't let perfect be the enemy of good. Right. I think that I just think that these are pretty good lyrics. It was a delight to get to them because, as I said before, I just don't love the lyrics on the rest of the album. But Roth, the music is always the meat. The lyrics are always the potatoes. let's talk about your meat, Rob. Let's just talk about this music.
About T-bone steak a la carte.
Yeah. What do you think about the music here?
Well, I realize Elvis sings, working on a T-bone steak a la carte. He says a la carte.
A la carte?
I think that's how Chuck Berry sings it too, a la carte. Yeah.
Listen, I don't know. We're going to have to provide a link to this song in the show notes because I've never.
And because of You Never Can Tell, we know that Chuck Berry knows how to speak French. So,
yeah.
Anyway,
okay.
Neither here nor there for this conversation. But so, yeah, This is, as I said earlier, this is one of the more poppy songs, especially the chorus, right? And what's interesting about the music is that when we're talking about the lyrics, the music is kind of upbeat for the subject matter. Right. And so maybe and it's interesting because perspective can change the meaning of something vastly. Right. A perfect example of this, if you take a surveillance camera footage of something like a puppy, like kissing a baby or a baby hugging a puppy, it can look sinister, right? If you have like a high angle, kind of grainy, like it can look sinister. And I think the lyrics, if you don't have the music to put it into context, it could sound a little deeper or darker than it actually is. So when you put it in the context of the music, the more upbeat, poppy music, it's kind of like, we were talking about like choosing the greater of two goods. It's kind of almost as if, and I'm saying almost as if, the narrator is saying, yes, there are problems here, but I'm kind of happy they're good problems, right? I'm kind of happy that I'm choosing between an embarrassment of riches in terms of goodness.
Yeah. So on the music for me, Rafi, all right. So I actually really like this song overall. The melody, I think, is quite memorable, really memorable, actually. But it's still a heavy song. It's not one of the heavier songs on the album, but it's still heavy, I think, relative to certainly the kind of synth era Rush, right? It's also loose in a really great way that, again, is uncharacteristic, in my opinion, of Rush throughout the vast majority of their career. This is it is a loose performance.
It's loose, but it is still anthemic, though. Yeah. Both that opening heavy guitar riff, dun, 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 like it's very, you could see the lights going up in the stadium and, shining on everyone. But also the chorus is also very anthemic too, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've a number of times, kind of over the course of this podcast, I've talked about Rush being taught, and I think that's I use that word because I think it's a really good description. It's not tight. It's just super. They're just super. Yeah, I guess tight is maybe the right way to do it, but it's not a bad thing. It's just that Rush is just never felt loose to me. And lots of bands fit, like, again, Led Zeppelin, a classically loose band. You know what I mean? Heavy, but loose. I think Soundgarden, I just mentioned Soundgarden, heavy, but loose. This is not, or it's like, a band I don't like, but Rage Against the Machine, you would never say that's a loose band. They're tight, right? So I think this is kind of uncharacteristically loose for Rush, but I really like it. The one thing that I would say is when I was listening to this, I was like, God, this feels like a Moving Pictures era Rush song to me. Do you take that bait?
Nah.
No? Okay.
I can't. I can sniff the bait.
All right, you're gonna sniff the bait. You're gonna sniff the bait.
But I don't think I'm going to bite it.
All right. Well, listen, listeners, throw us a comment, throw us an email, throw us a message on the social medias. Tell us whether you think this sounds like a Moving Pictures era song. Prove Rafi wrong.
So, by the way, and again, I should have said this in the general comments of this album, but the last album we did with Counterparts, it was we recorded it on news of Peter Collins' death.
Yes.
And I think we were saying sorry, but we're going to have to, I don't want to say trash the album, but we're going to be pretty harsh on it. So I'm glad to say that for his final album with the band, we're lauding it. And we're not doing that out of any kind of sense of pity for Peter Collins. We're doing it because it's a really great album.
Yeah, no, I think I'm glad you mentioned that, Raf, because I completely agree. I think I may, it would take me a little bit more consideration, but I would put this among my favorite produced Rush albums ever.
Yeah,
Like,
I can see that. Yeah.
I think
if you're writing a top 20 list of your top 20 studio albums of Rush, it'll be on that list.
I'm really interested to hear that next. I'm really interested to hear that next, to hear Vapor Trails for the first time, because I have heard nothing but kind of shitty comments about the way that album sounds. And I just feel like this album sounds so good that it's going to be surprising to hear Vapor Trails if it really is as bad as everyone says.
Well, we have to make a choice here. Like, are we going to listen to the original version or the remixed version?
I haven't even done any research to see if the original one is available online, but
I'm sure on YouTube it's available. If it isn't, I have the CD, that like the original press of the CD, so I can get it and burn it and send it to you.
Yeah. Well, listen, why don't we'll decide that offline, but it may be worth at least listening to one or two songs on both to compare and contrast.
Well, why don't we do it? We'll do a sort of a kill two birds with one stone here. First of all, see who's actually listening, and B, we'll ask the people who are actually listening, which version should we review? Should we review the remixed version, or should we do the original version? I personally think we should do the original version, because if we're going back to the vinyl and saying there were three sides to the vinyl and doing three sides, we might as well be consistent and be purists and go with the original version.
Agreed. Okay, so Rafi, listen, we are now at the end of side A. Can you believe it? It went by so fast.
It did. Oh my God.
All right, so,
Jesus Christ.
Rafi, next week, we're going to come back with side B of Test Struggle.
And we're going to record the entire podcast like this, like we're morning show hosts.
High energy, man. It's like the kids on YouTube. They act like fucking spaz attacks, and that's how you get the views.
Don't buy a pen until you do this first. That's how millennial marketing works.
All right, so listen.
I've got 10 things to say. You won't believe number 7.
All right, Ralph, listen. It's been fun, as always. We will be back next week with Side B of Test for Echo. In the meantime, fucking subscribe. Just hit the button. Just do yourself a goddamn favor.
Yeah, you dorks.
BacktrackingRocks@gmail.com. Instagram BacktrackingRocksRox. Twitter BacktrackingRocksRox.
Yeah, you rush dorks.
User BacktrackingRocks. Just do any of those things. Now you can even put a comment next to the podcast if you happen to listen to it on Spotify. This is a new feature. Spotify, they called me, the boss of Spotify. He's like, Fiden, you got to help me out, man. I need some comments on the fucking Spotify. I'm like, listen, guy, I got the podcast with the people who love to comment. I'm going to make it happen for you.
I agree.
Okay. All right. So we'll see you next week. Yeah, that's it. Bye-bye.
Bye.